Well, good morning and actually afternoon. So I'm Mark Cody and welcome to the April Getting It Done in 2022 event. This is a complimentary Focal Point business and executive coaching seminar. This is sponsored by our New England and our South Florida team of coaches with Focal Point. And each month we look to bring you a quick 30-minute hit topic on something that can be really relevant for you. In addition to being a coach, I'm also the host and the moderator today, and also the area representative for New England and South Florida, and really glad to be here. Next slide. So we are recording today, so everybody who attends will have a chance to actually, get a copy of the recording if you'd like, or if you know other folks that didn't have a chance to be here but might like a copy of the recording, reach out to any one of us here, and we're happy to provide them a link to that as well. Next slide. So get the most out of this. This is kind of wringing it out of the towel or wringing out the most amount of value you can get from our session today. It's going to be quick. You're going to hear a lot of really relevant points. So set your workspace up for whatever you want to get out of it. So you know what? I encourage you to set it up as a 10, which is you set the phone aside, close down email, just be engaged for the next 25 or so minutes. I guarantee you'll walk away with some good insights. So next slide. So building an aligned and accountable team and finding and retraining great employees. Really proud to introduce both Steve DeVries and Charlie Janes, who will be taking us through that today. So Steve and Charlie, over to you.
All right, well, I'm going to kick things off here. Thanks very much, Mark. So we would like to start with just talking about some of the problems as it relates to retaining and holding on to your workforce. So, remote and hybrid work, we all know it. It's made things difficult, certainly from an employer perspective, to keep employees aligned and accountable. So, before the pandemic, everybody went to the office, right? And for many of us, we were forced to learn how to adapt to working remotely. But here's the thing, we got used to it. And now companies are struggling with how to bring employees back, or if they even should. One thing to bear in mind, the impact that remote and hybrid work can have on the culture of your business, which can really impact an employee's decision to either stay with the company or join the company. Right, Charlie?
Well, that's right. But the point I want to make is that while remote and hybrid work is new for many businesses and departments, many others have been doing it forever. I managed global field teams for over 30 years, over 100 people all over the globe. And there's been companies in the last decade that have been set up to be purposely remote. HubSpot's one of them. So those of you that are struggling with it, there's places that you can go to learn from businesses that are already successfully operating this way. And they'll give you lots of hacks. An example I want to give you is what I did as a distributed field manager. Is every morning I used a free tool called WhatsApp. And I would just ask my team to volunteer the 3 things they were going to work on for the day and the 1 thing they needed help with. And it created a sense of community, accountability, and also a little bit of competition. When people would start seeing what others were working on, they raised their game a little bit. So there's a lot of simple things you can do.
Great tip, Charlie. And, so that's one type of business. On the other hand, is the world that I came from, which is manufacturing. And the challenges that manufacturers have is you've got direct labor employees and their management team who have to be in the building because it's something that you're making. All the equipment and the materials are at the building. But during the pandemic, a lot of people were, the back office types were forced to work from home. And now there's some challenges with those employers bringing people back, and should they or shouldn't they? And I'm not sure that there's a 100% right answer, but thinking about it in terms of your company's culture is important. In a manufacturing company, your product really is what the core of your business is centered around. And so to have half the business in the building and half the business out of the building, you can really start to see 2 different cultures begin to take place. So I would always caution employers to, when they're making the decision on who works remote and who has to be there, to keep it in mind through the viewpoint of your culture. So let's move to the next slide, Charlie. So, we've all heard this. Businesses are struggling to hire and retain engaged employees. right? It's been an ongoing theme through COVID. And now as sort of the new normal is taking shape, there's numbers to quantify it. So here's a statistic from a recent job openings and labor turnover survey. So as of the end of February this year, there were 1.8 jobs open for every unemployed person. So just let that sink in for a second. Every unemployed person theoretically has about 2 jobs that they could choose from. So besides the unemployed people having choices, this also greatly impacts people who are currently working for you to make a change. There's just an abundance of opportunity. And so here's another statistic that can be a little bit startling if you're an employer. So in a report from the Predictive Index, a survey response indicated that about half of the current workforce has or is considering a career change in the next 12 months. So this great resignation that we keep hearing about, the situation isn't likely going to go away anytime soon. So let's move to the next slide. So let's talk about how we can turn this great resignation into the great retention. We've probably heard both of those terms, and it's really something that I'm passionate about. So it starts with becoming a great employer, where your employees are compelled to stay rather than venture off into something different. So what makes employees want to stay where they work? It used to be the easy answer was more money, but we're way beyond that now. So if you just did a Google search on compensation versus culture, you'll find one survey results after another, where employees really care more about where they're going to work in terms of culture than what they're getting paid. And so now in our sort of post-COVID world, culture becomes even more important. Employees simply want to be happy with what they do. The daily grind for a paycheck just isn't good enough if you're an employer. So employers have to understand that whether they have a workplace culture that's strong or is it weak, is it positive or negative? Do the employees understand the values of their employer? Can the employer themselves even point to what their company values are? And do they know how their role fits into the company's mission for individual employees? It's really a big challenge for businesses that haven't developed a culture to start really establishing one in order to retain the folks that they've come to rely on so greatly. So let's move to the next slide, Charlie. So if you're unsure about where employees, where to start about figuring out what your culture is and what your employees know about it, start by seeing what's said online. Go to Glassdoor. There's a good chance that your business can be found on Glassdoor, and you may find some really interesting feedback from current and former employees. Now, a lot of times you're going to see, a disgruntled former employee post something really negative on that space. But I would challenge you to look at it, read it, internalize it, think about it, and see if there's anything that you can glean from some of those comments.
Yeah, don't be defensive about it.
Yeah, be open-minded. It can only help, right? So the next recommendation that we have regular, and this is really, really important, have regular conversations with your employees about what they love about their jobs, and then some of the areas where they may not be as happy. Installing these types of conversations as a part of your cultural norm, is so critical. Employees want to know that what they're thinking matters and what they feel matters. They just want to matter to the grand scheme of things. And once you've installed some of those conversations, you can even follow it up with an employee survey and just let them know you're really listening. And so the last thing we would recommend here is ask the ultimate question versus the NPS or Net Promoter Score. A lot of companies use this tool for measuring their customer experience, but they can also use it for measuring your internal customer experience. So using it with employees, you might ask something like, how likely are you on a scale of 1 to 10 to refer a friend to work at our company? Or as an alternate, ask them anonymously, how likely are you to continue working with us next year? And then a follow-up question might be something like, what's one thing we can do to make sure that we score a 10? So again, asking employees what it is they're thinking and what they like, what they'd like to see improved, goes a long way. And as long as you take action on it, then you're really moving in the right step.
And we have a couple HR professionals in the audience. So please, if you have questions that you like to ask, share them, or we'll put them in the chat and we'll share them with the rest of the group.
So next slide. So how do you evaluate culture? And are you communicating your values? So we asked in the previous slide if your employees know the company values. That has to start with owners and leaders of the business. You have to know what you stand for. How will your company do business? What behaviors and actions will you encourage? And what will you absolutely never, ever stand for in your business? Once you know that, you have to communicate it out to the troops. Everybody has to understand it. Everyone has to be held accountable to it, regardless of their role in the business. This will establish your company's moral compass. And then you live it, you breathe it, you never back away from it. And this will really build a strong foundation. Next slide. So then again, evaluating culture, something that we recommend, and Charlie, I'll encourage you to jump in here. But we always offer DISC profiles to sort of figure out what your teammates' behavioral and motivational motivations are, right?
Well, for sure. So first off, it doesn't need to be DISC. There's a wide range of assessments out there. At Focal Point, we use one of the most popular ones in the corporate world. DISC evaluates, among other things, your behavior styles and your motivations. So often we start with an executive one-on-one, but where this really becomes powerful is we're building a leadership team, or we're building a departmental team, or even sometimes when we're building problem-solving teams called tiger teams. We do a workshop where we give the assessments to the individuals, but then we get them in the room, and this circle on this graph shows how a team might be charted in a given company. This one happens to be a construction company I work with. And by helping people understand how they handle problem solving, influencing others, handling the pace of an environment, following rules, you'll see that you'll have a mix of people and styles. And none of those styles are perfect. They work best when they coalesce and each person understands each other. So that is a good way to define scientifically a bit about your culture and who the people are, and then try to design your organization. Now, in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about 5 recommendations that you can do to improve employee engagement and accountability in your organization. But you got to be wondering, is it worth it? I've got a day job. I'm trying to run a business, or I'm trying to grow my career. So I'm going to give you some numbers here, but I'm also going to ask any of you to volunteer numbers once I give you these categories. If these numbers don't look right, let us know what you think. I selected these numbers from a Harvard Business Review and a study done by Gallup Studies, which is one of the foremost HR service survey companies. So the impact of disengaged workers are 37% higher absenteeism, 49% more accidents, and 60% more errors. And how does that impact the business itself? Well, overall, 18% less productive than your peer group, 16% lower profitability, 37% less job growth, 65% less share price if you're a publicly traded company, and this certainly translates if you're trying to prepare your business for your own personal exit, if it's a private business. And what you'll find, and this was true of one of our Focal Point clients, a HVAC company that we heard from at our conference, where there were a number of installers that just weren't showing up on a regular basis with no notice, no feedback. When they ended up just letting those people go and initially scaling back the business, what ended up happening is that the owner had a deeper relationship with the employees that were committed to the business. And word got out into the community, and they started getting installers from their competitors wanting to work for the company that really cared about the results that they were delivering for their clients. It turns out there are a good number of people that are mission-based and believe what you believe, that the customer matters. So sometimes you've got to do the hard thing to clean things up, but in that case, you'll get the prime candidates, and you won't be working with just the people who are out of work and maybe a little disgruntled. So on to the recommendations. Might seem obvious, but the first step is to invest in your low and mid-level employees. Studies show that the millennial generation in particular doesn't choose jobs based solely on pay, although it might seem that way for those of you making offers right now. Studies show that they care very much about their career progression, as well as your company's values in its community. So helping your employees, you understanding your employees' goals for financial success, business success, health, family, lifestyle, even faith, and knowing them a little bit better, and then helping them maybe as mentors, maybe even assigning a mentor, is a great way to build loyalty with an employee. And it really doesn't cost anything to know your people well, and then to help them evolve and be successful across all phases of their life.
Charlie, that's a great point. I would just add with the younger generation, one of the things I've seen is they love constant feedback, right? They live in a world where they're getting all that social media feedback constantly, and so by providing that really helps build your culture as well, because they're getting that feedback that they've grown up with, right? It's not that they just desire it for the sake of desiring it. It's part of their environment. So build that into your culture as well.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Steve. So the second recommendation is train them. And beyond just the tactical skills they need to fulfill their specific role within their organization, there's a range of life skills that they'll need through their full career. But by providing them, they'll perform better within their current role, and then you'll have a pool of people to promote into leadership positions over time. So these may be skills like communication, leadership, even sales skills. A lot of business, it's important that everybody understands that they need to think like a customer. And even if they're not interfacing with a customer on a regular basis, some simple sales skills help give employees more empathy to the point of view of a customer. So in Focal Point, and there's many options out there in the industry, but we combine training with coaching. So you have options for online on-demand classes with workbooks and recordings from Brian Tracy and audio files. Oftentimes I combine that then with a focused application to the business scenario as a follow-up once they've learned the basic skill. And then of course, all these are available and in-person on-site classes or remote classes that are live and tailored to your needs. The third recommendation is to develop a coaching culture. A coaching culture is where, rather than telling people what to do and being very directive, you have an engagement with your client where you're asking them questions about their goals. For instance, their top 3 things that they're going to accomplish for the day to make the greatest impact on the day, where they might see a constraint or a problem that comes up. Help them think through it and solve their own problems. You'll develop the employee and they'll be much more accountable to you. So Navigational Conversations is a class that we've jointly developed with some partners that Focal Point coaches go through. We make these available to our customers as well. We have an open enrollment class coming up in June. So if you're interested, Mark will send the link out and there's a way to register for that, but we highly recommend it. Look how good we turned out. And then you can also do custom classes, in your organization as well. Steve, you don't buy that we turned out very well, or you don't think I did?
No, I just love the shameless plug, Charlie.
Yeah, it is.
No, but in all seriousness, I love NAVC as well. Showing your employees how to get from point A to point B and figure it out for themselves, and guiding on that path is just really powerful stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So Steve, earlier you were talking about integrating culture into the business. And I just want to reiterate that once you take the time to understand your values and you define your mission, that's really important, because the why behind your business is why your clients buy from you and remain loyal. And certainly it's why your employees will remain loyal. But it's not a one-time thing. So I use this one-page form that's been popularized by a number of coaching methodologies, but it's used by thousands of businesses to construct a one-page strategic plan. And on the far left side, you'll see the values, which last for 10 to 15 years, and the mission. But then in the middle parts, there's the targets, the business targets, revenue or profit, or often all my clients measure Net Promoter Score either for their customers and or for their employees, because that's just essential to all businesses. But the idea I want to get across here is that it's not all on the department head or the owner's shoulders. In the middle parts of the workshop, you come up, or in the spreadsheet, you come up with actions that you're going to take over a 3-year window, a 1-year window, a quarterly window. You come up with initiatives, and the key is that the initiatives get funneled down to your employees. They get delegated. And the idea is every employee should own a number that contributes to the success of the business and of the clients. And you keep that live and real. And for smaller businesses, the paper format works well, but I also want to point out that there's a number of really great solutions out there for automating these solutions. And one of them is Focal Point Focus from our partners Align down in New Orleans. I implement this with a good number of my clients. What I love about it is it gives the ability for the leader of a company to create their one-page strategic plan and put it in a place that's consumable by employees, where the employees understand the plan. And then there's 3 to 5 goals that they measure religiously. It's usually a number of customers, the amount of revenue, the amount of profit, employee Net Promoter Score or customer Net Promoter Score is usually in there, but it could be other things as well. But you don't want to measure more than 3 to 5 things. And then each employee should have cascading values, just like if you see on the far side of the slide, the left side, those little dials. Every employee should have a dial, and as they're in the red, it shows that as the cumulative employees are all in the red, it gives you a prediction that the company is not going to hit its goals, and you can take corrective action early rather than just coming up short. And that's a great way to build accountability and build a connection between your employees so that they know how their work contributes to success. And that is a major factor in keeping people with you. And when you're coming short on your goals, how you handle that and communicate it by not casting blame is also important. But having every employee know how their work contributes, I think, is the #1 thing that keeps them tied to your business and loyal. And I can tell you many different stories, but we don't have that much time. So Focal Point Align is available on desktops and mobile, so employees can constantly know where they're at and simply put their numbers in. It takes less than a minute every single day to stay current, so it's not a lot of overhead. So I highly recommend it. So now transitioning out, Steve, Mark, and I want to make an offer to you. We've thrown a lot at you in a very short amount of time. So those of you that are interested in learning more about anything we've discussed or digging into any specific areas that you're of interest to, contact Steve or I, and we'll give you a strategic business review on your business, or we'll even send you this little business growth scorecard, but we'll help you with any of these issues. So we want to encourage you to send us some questions today in the 5 minutes that we have left. And while you're constructing those, I'm just going to put the agenda for our session next month up as well, where Ellis Mass will talk about how to amplify your networking in the new normal. Any questions, Mark?
Yeah, so please do put your questions in the chat box. I'll take a look at that again in a second. So Charlie, thanks very much for mentioning Ellis's seminar coming up. Actually, it's in May. It'll be May 10th. So that link is in the chat box as well. And as I look there, I do have one question that came up. And this is, would you comment on the differences between hiring/inspiring millennials, Gen Ys versus earlier generations? I don't know if Steve or Charlie, who might like to take that?
I mean, I'll give it a start, but Charlie, certainly jump in. I mean, so we talked a little bit about, the feedback, right? So when you talk about the newer generations, making sure that there's a structure in place where there is going to be that that future plan where they can see that, you know, in X amount of time, they can potentially reach X level in the workforce, and giving them a chance to articulate where they'd like to go, as opposed to just showing up and giving them a job, which is kind of like what it was in the old days, right? You'd be happy to have a job, and you'd put your head down and you'd show up to work every day on time. You know, and employers were more than willing to just allow that to go on because nobody made any noise. It doesn't work that way anymore. You've really got to make sure that that constant feedback loop is installed and that it's constructive.
That's a great answer.
So there's another question that's been put into the chat box as well. And this is Felipe in Miami. So thank you for that, Felipe. Do you have any recommendations on how I can hire people with the right attitude or values?
Oh, I love that question. So certainly, Felipe, first you need to have a very firm grasp of what your values are and what values and what attitudes that you really adhere to. One of the tricks that I used to use when I managed large numbers of people is when I would review a resume, I would read through it and just simply ask them lots of questions about decisions that they had made in the past and why they joined a company, what they loved about a company, what they didn't love about the company. But I always interview for attitude and motivation before I start trying to qualify them about skills and knowledge. Because really, someone that wants a job can convince you. The longer you talk with them, they'll start gleaning what you believe. So you want to get them to volunteer first what they believe and how they handle things. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, I think that's great. I was going to say that, you know, attitude is everything, and you can teach skills, but you can't teach attitude.
Right.
Really good point, guys. Hey, we are coming near the end. There's just one or two other questions, but I want to be very respectful for everybody's time because I do appreciate you all joining us today, taking 30 minutes out of your calendar to hopefully be able to walk away with some tips that you might be able to implement in your business around enhancing that culture, being true to your values, and really creating an organization that people are going to want to join, like that HVAC company that Charlie talked about. So Charlie, can you just advance to the next slide for a moment? We do want to thank everybody for being here. There is a link in the chat box for our session next month with Ellis Mass on amplifying your networking. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Please tell your friends, and we look forward to seeing you at future events as well. Have a great day.
Everybody.
And good luck at your businesses.
Thanks, everybody.